2 years ago, I published a video entitled Navigating Divorce with Love, the Power of Conscious Separation. In that video, I covered how divorce can be a pathway to self-discovery, personal growth, and a new empowered chapter in your life. Today, with further perspective, now that 3 years have passed since my ex-husband and my decision to separate, I felt called to share more deeper insights. This is what I've learned about relational evolution. I naturally felt the call to share now, as it seems to have taken 3 years to heal any major emotional debris still stored in my nervous system from the separation, and to reach a stable yet ever-evolving state of wholeness. A little bit about my story. I had spent 18 years with my ex-husband, 11 of those married. We met when I was 20, and in many ways we had a great relationship. In fact, many saw us as what people like to call the perfect couple. In 2018, we had our daughter, and I have no doubt that she was the greater purpose of our coming together. And despite many beautiful aspects to our story, that relationship unfolded during a time of deep unconscious emotional enacting. Essentially, we were playing out childhood and ancestral wounds which neither of us had yet faced. And I will only speak for myself here, but my marriage brought to light and amplified my core wounds of unworthiness and self-doubt, looking for love outside of myself, and therefore resulting in codependency. He also had his own package, and we were playing out each other's wounds. Ultimately, I was disconnected from myself, sourcing love and power outside of myself, which created tremendous suffering, not only times in despair and victimhood within the dynamic of the relationship, but my disconnection from self also manifested in years of chronic insomnia, people-pleasing, lack of boundaries, outsourcing my power to inadequate healing modalities, which then resulted in 9 months of panic attacks and out-of-body experiences. My disconnection also played out in all circumstances and relationships, as it does. So now fast forward to gaining enough self-knowledge and self-love and embodiment to trust my intuition, when I started dropping judgment of my experience whilst I was still within the container of my marriage, I accessed more unconditional love. But in that unconditionality, it also became clear that the nature of our bond was no longer romantic, and that we had, for several reasons, done our time together as a couple. As I developed at length in my previous video, I still consider us family, just a redefined one. 3 years into the separation, with more perspective now, I can see that not only the relationship, but also the emotionally heavy separation process which followed served my journey of embodiment, anchoring myself in self-trust and empowerment. And that is emotional resolution. That is the gift of taking full responsibility for your experience. That truly is grace. As I like to say, it has been a heavy-duty process of alchemy and transmutation of many emotions and stored pain patterns, but one that I'm deeply grateful for. And although it resulted in more lightness of being, it did require me to fully accept my situation and take entire responsibility for my reality, my feelings and emotions. That relationship and the few brief connections which came my way after my marriage brought me back to myself, brought me back to wholeness. And that is the purpose of every relationship we have, to mirror back to ourselves the way back within, to our own truth, creativity, and power. In other words, to our divinity. All evidence always points back to you, to look within, to accept, receive, and alchemize any experience into fuel for growth. We live in a field of relativity, and in this dimension we tend to forget our sovereign power and become over-identified with our relativity to everything else. Essentially, we consider our existence to be relative to everything else, meaning that we let everything else define us, that we define ourselves by our environment, our work, our status, our friends, partners, and that's conditioning. So the purpose of relationships is to mirror our wounds and beauty so that we can learn discernment through receptivity, through our capacity to receive life, to feel fully. We learn to know ourselves, to piece together the parts of ourselves which we had abandoned, and to establish ourselves in love, to give our attention to love, so that, in the words of my teacher Anand Mehrotra, love becomes the dominant quality within the field of our awareness, until love consciously becomes the fundamental driving force of our life. I haven't really had a committed relationship since my divorce, but I have been blessed to have met 3 magnificent individuals who played a key role in my evolution in the most divine orchestration. Each, just by their showing up in my life, gradually helped me shave off attachments and projections born from a mistaken idea of what love is. There is no need to be in a committed relationship for an encounter to be extremely rich and healing. It really all depends on how willing you are to look within and read between the lines. And actually, the past 3 years have mostly been a fasting from relationship, which taught me how to walk a straight line without losing my center, without falling head over heels back into addictive chemistry or into the unstable reverberation of a mistaken notion of what love is. And I'm glad it was that way. Actually, it was so perfect, filled with synchronistic elements that you could not have made it up if you tried. And that's always the way it is. When we lean into our experience of life, the divine plan which shows up is so much better than anything you could have tried to create through control. Well, because control is not creativity, whereas life's intent flowing through us, when allowed, is the creative force of life. So, it will always be much more radiant and impressive than anything that you try to force. And when you are in a state of enough receptivity, the life force which directs the play will always bring into the sphere of your experience very rich experiences and just the right individuals. Because it was so, and because of my trust in my own spirit, what allowed me not to fully succumb to projections and attachment was to always remember the goodness I witnessed in the individuals the moment I met them, and to hold on to that whilst cleansing my own lens on a daily basis, through trust, practice and devotion to a love that is not attached to anybody and that is not a fleeting emotional wave. Sometimes the orchestration of events which brought us together was so big and unexpected. The circumstances in which I met these individuals were so unique that my knowing of their innocence and my knowing of their good intent, combined with my trust in my own spirit, would be the unwavering, stable pillars I would hold on to as I would light a candle on my altar, representing the purity of the love, and then I would feel through, chant through, breathe through, pray through, move through the pain of the echo of my own old projections and attachments. And that devotion to the purity of the love gradually brought me back to my center, until that practice of not being pulled in on directions by my mind's own projections became more of a natural state of being. As I cleansed my projections, I could discern what is mine and what is not. I could make more space for felt stillness and establish a deeper, more grounded residence in stillness, vastness, and union within. I could establish myself in more presence. For our capacity to feel our feelings and process emotions through the body leaves way for more presence. And when we cultivate that stable state of stillness and vastness within, we make space for grace. The grace of our pain, revealing that what was always there, wholeness and love. The grace of approaching life from wholeness and love. The grace of transcending doubt and establishing ourselves more consistently in the frequency of love. So through every encounter, I flex my core muscles, meaning instead of being pulled off my center, I found my core stability. That stability allowed me to have discernment, to know who I am, have trust in myself, and be perceptive about other people. By knowing my own limitations and residues of projections, I can continue cleansing to the point of purity and lightness, without the need for rigid boundaries. Instead, energetic sovereignty and a love that is light, unconditional, not charged with expectations. Because I am consciously evolving and making the choice to look within and take full responsibility, then the people I attract and am attracted to are a match to a more evolved version of me. And when projections come, I hold onto what I know of them to be true, the beauty of their soul I witnessed when we met. I must stress here that in the process of doing so, I do not bypass my feelings. I actively feel the full spectrum of my experience. I feel the good, the bad, and the ugly. I let everything move through my body. I work on stabilizing my inner system. I correct my intellect until more love than fear becomes available in my heart and in my full body, really. And the more expansive right action of the moment becomes clear to me. I have learned over the years to stabilize myself out of altered states of suffering back into a coherent mind, body, heart, and soul cooperation. I walk a straight line in the field of love, established in love, and I aim to relate from there. And that doesn't mean that I find excuses for others or self-abandon in any way. I am established in the field of love, in the consciousness of a God consciousness, and I let that inform how I relate to myself by making the choice of love moment by moment. I relate to my own divinity, and then I let that inform how I relate to others. And of course, to the best of my capacity, I'm also human after all. And being human is also a key component to living from wholeness. Our acceptance of others in their totality is directly proportional to our acceptance and integration of our own shadow tendencies and fragmented parts of self. If I bypass the stage of connecting to my deeper knowing, the path that chooses love over reaction, then the me that shows up in a relationship is essentially just a bundle of learned survival behaviors, and it's not my true, whole, integrated self. And over time, this process doesn't need to be cognized. It becomes a somatic memory, a felt pathway we feel into to choose the most expansive response to any situation. So what is key is that I need to be in me first, in my body, connected to my breath, so I can continue to see you for who you truly are. Otherwise, the learned behaviors are so ingrained in the nervous system as survival behaviors and responses that all we do is perpetuate judgment and blame. And instead of opening our hearts to the other, we put up a veil or a wall of protection. So, building stability within yourself means that you are plugged into your soul, to the divine, into the true intent of life, of the moment. You are anchored in presence. You have access to the vastness of your being. In other words, you have spaciousness, space. And that space allows you to apply awareness and discernment and to rewrite the survival tendencies. It's a process which happens over time through the reintegration of abandoned and rejected aspects of self, through shifts in perception and thinking. But that is a longer subject and one that I have addressed at length in my upcoming book. This process is one of coming back to our original awareness, the awareness of our wholeness, our stability. And that stability in part comes from a balanced nervous system, which then acts as a container for life. It allows us to hold the fullness of our experience, not in control, but in receptivity. We become receptive to it all without judgment, but in trust of our body. Or you could say, if you want to go deeper, that inner unity allows us to be with the totality of our experience and brings us back to totality. So essentially, the more awareness, stability, and receptivity, the more sensitivity, meaning that the felt experience of being connected to the whole of life, the awareness of a greater benevolent intentionality behind our existence becomes more available. So the more anchored we are in our body, in presence, the more we can receive life instead of protecting from it. And the more we can realize not only our capacity to expand around anything, but for everything to be fuel for growth, expansion, and authenticity. This requires a key element: acceptance of what is. But I also find that reframing our thinking to adopt a vaster perspective, dare I say a spiritual perspective, greatly accelerates this process. Marianne Williamson said, "Spiritual understanding is a corrective to any false thinking you have acquired as a child." And Carl Jung said something along the lines of, "At their peak, spirituality and psychotherapy are the same. They are a reframing of the mind," which is a quote that Marianne Williamson likes to mention. Yoga teaches us that life can only be the way you are, for life is an experience you are having. So there is no life outside of you. So by clearing the veils of limited perceptions, reframing our thinking beyond judgment, we can start to, more consistently, as the Sufis say, move the way love would have us move. We move from isolated ego-based thinking to more unity, to love. And that's the beauty of acknowledging every experience and every relationship as a pointer to going within, to applying felt awareness, transcending doubts, and letting our deeply rooted presence inform our next response. What I'm suggesting here is that to improve your relationship to yourself and to life, it helps immensely to integrate the following laws. First, there is no life outside of you. Second, The universe is a hologram, it's a benevolent mirror. Any experience and anyone who comes into your sphere teaches you how to love and be loved. If you can adopt those two simple rules and combine them with emotional intelligence, meaning to take full responsibility for your emotions, eradicate judgment and blame, and practice receptivity, as well as dissolve veils of protection, then you will be set on a deeply fulfilling path. And the alternative of not doing so is to remain in narrow thinking and to repeat the past. So you can see how the starting point is your relationship with you. Your outer experience will always point back to aspects of you. Your relationships will be a mirror of your inner world. So would you like them to mirror love or to mirror fear? Then, as Anand Mehrotra so perfectly says, organize yourself around love. Give your attention to love. Yoga Vedantic teachings shared by Anand say the following about love. Love, in its fundamental level, is who you are. Love, in its relative level, is a practice. And the love of self is the experience of oneself as love. And the experience of oneself as love is when your consciousness is not hijacked by the ego. If we accept to see them that way, relationships will shatter our ego and bring us back to our true nature. So what does this mean practically? How do you apply this in your own relationships? Let me distill what I've learned into 6 essential practices that have transformed not just my relationships, but my entire experience of life. First, your relationship with you. You cannot relate with another in ways that you cannot first relate with yourself. And that takes knowing yourself, being aware of our automatic responses and our power to be with any experience, to distill it to its most expansive, embracing expression, to the point that love arises. When your relationship to yourself is more compassionate, when it's more understanding and coherent, then relational friction with others softens too. Any pain that you experience becomes information about where you can dissolve conditioning, where you can go deeper within through practiced awareness. And anything that is not harmony, you can consider to be a learned pattern. So you can consider it not to be your essential nature. You cannot dissociate how you relate to your loved one from how you relate to yourself. The other points back to you. The other points back to you. Always. Not that their wounding is yours, but if it still takes you off your center, then you can refine, you can nurture, you can balance and retrain the nervous system, as well as correct your thinking. You can heal. And anything that is not in harmony is a learned behavior. It's a pattern. It points to a part of you have abandoned or are still judging. As you reintegrate those parts, you heal your relationship with yourself. You heal you. You heal your relationships. You heal you. You heal you. You heal your relationships. And pain points dissipate. Then you drop the charge and there is no more emotional charge. So that leaves place to more being and more knowing yourself as love rather than yourself as limited or unworthy. And I find that values also play a role. Integrity, commitment to the alignment, commitment to the alignment that the moment calls for, commitment to the experience and the expression of love will show you the way to disarm some of the most toxic emotional patterns you are faced with. But let me be clear here. that the choice of love is not weak in any way. It will often be the most courageous choice you have to make. It might also express as tough love at times, but ultimately it is the purity of the intention behind the choice which will inform its impacts. Secondly, your relativity and conditioning. Our environment reveals both our beauty and our conditioning. We do not exist in isolation, we exist in a field of relation. Everything that is external is actually reflected internally in some way. When we do not experience harmony, we are out of sync with our natural state. I think we have established that. Our environment and relationships can point to where to bring awareness. So for example, if you feel unseen in a friendship, the mirror of the relationship might be asking you, where have you not been seeing yourself? Or if a partner triggers your fear of abandonment, it might reflect to what part of you have you abandoned in moments of vulnerability. And in this way, every relationship, whether fleeting or lifelong, joyful or difficult, becomes a holographic doorway into a deeper self-awareness. Instead of blaming my environment, I recognize it as an evolutionary mirror, meaning I am receptive to it. I allow the experience and drawing the intelligence of my being to see the forest from the trees, to see and address the patterns needing awareness in me. And over time, instead of being prone to limiting behaviors, pulled off my center constantly, I become more established in a state of being, and being is my baseline. It is the baseline from which I respond to any situation. And because I am anchored in being, in presence, what arises is what in yoga we call spontaneous right action. Action born from alignment. And in that sense, instead of being trapped in the relative field of existence, trapped in the mirror of relationship projections, relating becomes second to being. Being first, relating second. Thirdly, anchor in truth and love. We often hear said that the chemistry we experience when we first meet a romantic partner can be an indication of trauma bonding. Instead, I resonate more with the teaching in the Course in Miracles, which suggests that our first resonance with our partner or lover is actually showing us the truth of who we are and who they are. So in practice, that means that I remember my initial pure connection with my loved one as the truth, and I pass any judgment which arises after that through the filter of my conscious awareness. I place the person in the altar of my heart and bring myself back again and again to relating soul to soul. What I'm doing essentially is clearing my projections born from fear. And what this can be summed up by is let go of any narrative that is not love. I resonate with Anand's teaching on this subject, which says that fulfilling relationships is not about love. Love is independent of any relationship. Free yourself from any interpretation of relationship that has anything but love in it. So the more you anchor in yourself, in the field of love, the more you organize around love, the more you recognize that it is sourced within and not conditional to others acting or being a certain way, and the less you experience lovelessness. 4. Align with the evolutionary flow of life. Inherent to the fabric of existence is a vast, still field of intelligence, the stillness of the universe which holds us all, which holds our experience. From the presence of this profound stillness naturally arises a spark of life, an inherent intent, an impulse, the dynamism born from stillness. There is a primordial intention moving through every one of us. An evolutionary flow of life we get to align to be moved by it. I align with the evolutionary flow of life by clearing my lens, by shedding mistaken veils of perception, by stabilizing my inner system and refining my energy so life's intent can move me towards the most beneficiary relationship and my truest responses. And the way to align is to cultivate presence and stillness within. In doing so, what we're doing is that we emulate the fabric of this universe. We become the field of stillness from which life inherently arises. We become a pure vessel for life's intent, a pure vessel for nature's intent. That happens by consistently cultivating the right inner environment for a deeper awareness to arise and be more prominent than the voice of the ego. And that happens by involving the body. Becoming more trusting of the flow of life is also a manifestation of love becoming our dominant experience. Beyond just opening to and trusting the flow of life which leads us to evolve, the question we can ask ourselves in every moment is, as Anand Mehrotra puts it, am I serving the evolutionary impulse of the universe or am I opposing it? 5. Only what you are not giving can be missing in any moment. I have recently been very deliberate in choosing to adhere by the teaching in the Course of Miracles, which says, only what you are not giving can be missing in any given moment. If you want the experience of love, are you residing in love? That is a powerful way not to bring the past into the present moment and to practice compassion. If you want something, you show the way to it and let the other person meet you there through resonance. You rise, they rise, and therefore we have mutual elevation. And that's compassionate leadership within relationship. And it also means that within the container of the relationship, you are independent, meaning not codependent. Therefore, you free the other from your expectations. 6. Let your relationship with the sacred be your source of safety. The more you make space to recognize the spaciousness, the divinity within you, the more you recognize the presence of the divine in all, and the more you realize that you are never alone. So when dissonance arises within your relationship, instead of expecting resolution to come from your partner, you will know to source your guidance, your sense of directionality from source itself, and let that guidance pour into you and inform the way that you relate to you and to others. When both partners can establish themselves in the safety of such greater awareness and connection, they can show up in the relationship with greater integrity, respect, and deep trust. Many spiritual traditions talk about this triad of relationships. As Michael Mirdad says, connect with God, allow that connection to change us, and bring that change to others. And in the words of Anand Mehrotra again, it is our capacity to draw from the vertical relationship that allows us to enter any horizontal relationship from a positionality of celebration. Celebrating each other instead of manipulating each other. And the vertical being your relationship with God consciousness and that consciousness as you. And the horizontal being your relationships with human on this earth plane. So to conclude, The invitation is to see every relational circumstance as an opportunity to expand and refine our consciousness. And all those practices are amplified by a life lived from a place of wholeness. Then relationships become the fertile ground for gaining sovereignty, spiritual agency, and for exercising evolved love. The kind of love which brings heart consciousness and unifying choices back into the forefront of our collective awareness. And essentially, it all comes back to love. Love as the way and love as the landing place or space. The space of love is the space of unity where we transcend our perceived separation, and through presence we reunite with the whole. That is what my relationships have taught me. Instead of believing the self-doubt and the self-judgment, to cultivate stillness, to cultivate my connection with the infinite part of me, and to move the way it would make me move as best as I can in any given moment. And that is the practice of yoga, to get back to a state of yoga, the practice of love to come back to unity. In the words of Alana Fairchild, the love necessary for the shame of the world to heal. And that is the driving force behind our relational evolution. Relational evolution begins with alignment to love first. So, if you're in the thick of separation or relational pain right now, and this all sounds impossible, I see you, I feel you, I've been there. There were days I couldn't imagine feeling this clear. There were many times I was glued to the ground, overwhelmed with despair. So many tears, anxiety. So often I was convinced I'd never find my way back to myself. What I would say is start where you are. One breath, one moment of choosing presence over protection, and that's enough. The path unfolds from there. And if you really pay attention, you always can sense the part of you that is actually okay, regardless of the circumstances. And if you are experiencing sadness, know that when not resistance and fully felt, sadness is your doorway to detachment and clarity. It opens the heart. It's your capacity to be with darkness which gives you access to light, to clarity, and to love. And this is the journey. This is relational evolution, from fragmentation to wholeness, from seeking to sourcing, from fear to love, one relationship at a time, one moment at a time, starting with the one you have with yourself, the relationship with yourself. The more you transform, the more life will support you. Relating is a skill, not one that requires manipulation or control, but freedom from the mistaken idea of what love is and limiting beliefs about ourselves. And if you have children involved, yes, it does make things harder, only seemingly. They are also agents of the divine in your story, mirrors of the love which lives through you. Their presence will shape you to extract the most authentic expression of you by showing up even more fully for the occasion. It has been my experience with my daughter, and truly, my expansion is her expansion. The more I shed, the more sovereign I become, the more she blossoms, and the more we put an end to perpetuating generational suffering. Namaste.